Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durban.
And my name is Sean Chandler.
And Sean Chandler is joining me for something I haven't done in quite some time. A retro review. And I'm super excited to go back and revisit the retro reviews and to revisit it with the Hobbit trilogy, which should have been just a duology. Should have just been 2, and then it became 3. So we are going to, right now, retro review The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. This will be full of spoilers. We're gonna just kind of tear into this thing, go through the good, the bad, the ugly, all of that fun stuff. So, Sean, let's just begin with you here real quick. First off, tell us a little bit about your channel and what you do.
Yeah, so my channel is Sean Chandler Talks About here on YouTube as well as on Twitter. And I like to talk movies, like to talk movie news. And so I've got a daily movie news program. I watch about 3 movies in the theater per week, review them, as well as a little bit of television as it ties back to like comic booky superhero type stuff. TV shows like that I'll review and talk about a little bit. But that's my channel.
Awesome. And we did a Star Wars video together not too long ago where we really got into episode 7 and all that fun stuff. So
we did.
So now we get to repeat that with The Hobbit. So, Sean, what is some of your experience with Tolkien, the books, the movies? What is your past experience with this altogether world?
So my main experience with the world of Tolkien is the 70s cartoon of The Hobbit.
Oh, yes!
I mean, I don't even know. We didn't own it, but I just saw it dozens of times growing up. And that was my main exposure to it because my parents weren't big Tolkien fans that were like, here, read these books. And so I'd only seen this cartoon. And there's actually, I guess, the Lord of the Rings cartoons as well that I saw later when I was about 18 years old. But around when they were about to do the Lord of the Rings trilogy, went out and bought the whole set of The Hobbit plus the Lord of the Rings books, read them, enjoyed them enough, saw the Lord of the Rings films, enjoyed them enough, owned, I believe, all of them at some point in time. And when it comes to specifically The Hobbit, I never watched the movies. So I am watching them fresh for this series. And I was somewhat driven by what you just mentioned of. I was kind of put off pretty heavily by the fact that they took this short book and turned it into 3 long movies, and that was off-putting to me. So I was like, I'll see this eventually when I have a good reason. And Durban, you are my good reason.
All right, I'm glad I could be your good reason to get into the Tolkien world. My experience with this world is kind of similar. My first exposure was those old cartoons from the 70s, and specifically the Hobbit one. And Gollum from that cartoon gave me nightmares. So yes, I have that experience. And then my friends dragged me kicking and screaming to see the movies. I shouldn't say kicking and screaming. I just didn't really have too much of an idea of what it was. And when I saw Fellowship of the Ring, fell in love with the franchise right then and there. I own exclusively the extended editions because those editions are just brilliant. And then in high school, I decided I'm going to read the books. And then I read the Silmarillion, which was even harder. You know how the Bible has this person begat this person and that person begat that person? And that's really boring. But it's doable because it's the Bible and you know it's got some importance to it. The Silmarillion, it was fictional, but he wrote that stuff in there. Like, there was a whole genealogy line, and I'm just like, how does a guy fictionalize this? How does his brain work? With that said, let's talk a little bit of The Hobbit, The Unexpected Journey. So, Sean, your first time watching it, fresh eyeballs, what are your initial thoughts?
It was pretty much exactly what I was expecting, in that I was it was so long and drawn out that it was so difficult to even figure out what the direction was, what the point was, what the thing was, because the central plot was, let's go on an adventure. But it gave me so much backstory before we even got to that. And then we go off on this adventure, and then suddenly, we're in the elf village, and they're having like a dinner party with Saruman, and like there's just stuff, and you're like so much plotty stuff that has nothing to do with this actual story that we're telling right now. And then it gets on this big epic journey somewhere else. And at the same time, individual things, scenes, moments, characters, performances were all up to par with the series.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the overall look of it it always looked off to me. Like I was looking at a really expensive set and really expensive effects rather than fully convincing me. But then again, troll people and things like that your brain knows that you're looking at an effect.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I mean, it's like you'd look at it and it's like, this is, in and of itself, is pretty exciting. This is pretty cool to look at. But all of it together just seemed like this overlong thing that missed the point of the story that they were telling.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I read the Hobbit book, but when I read the book, it's super thin, way thinner than the other ones. And it was, all of the Tolkien books, it was the only one that didn't take me a year to read. It was quick and fast, and the whole central plot is let's go on an adventure, because it's more like a children's fun adventure story. And I feel like if the movie had approached it that way, and done just one movie based off of one book, and just felt comfortable with the idea, let's make a fun adventure movie rather than we have to match the epicness of The Lord of the Rings. If they were just faithful to the way the book was, I think we would be having a completely different conversation now. Because I agree with you, they padded it with just so much junk. And speaking of, Sean, you haven't seen nothing yet till you get into the second and the third one. You haven't seen nothing. This first one was the least padded and drawn out one. I'll get more to that in just a little bit, but it's just, if they had just stayed true to, let's just have fun with this, I think this movie would have been far better.
So, like, even just with the first 15 minutes of this movie, I started taking notes because I was like, what? How many beginning storylines are we setting up?
Yeah.
Like, as I recall from the beginning of the book, it just starts off, boom, Gandalf and Bilbo are talking. And then I looked it up, and that's where it starts. But I looked this up in my notes. So it introduces Bilbo. It introduces the plot line of the city. It introduces the dwarves' backstory. So you're 9 minutes into it. Then it has this Lord of the Rings bookend where Frodo kind of shows up. Now we're 13 minutes into it till you get to the beginning of the book. Because they're setting up all of these extra things. And because they want it to be an epic, then, you have to have these other plot lines and expand things. Well, because you're expanding things, then the story slows down because you have these other elements. So because we're doing that, we need to put something fun in there, so then we have to have an action sequence in the middle. And so each thing you blowed up makes it so that you keep... Well, so here's a comparison. I do a lot of sound mixing. Yeah. And when you're mixing sound, one of the things you learn to do is not just turn everything up, you have to learn to turn things down so that the right things can be turned up. Like, you turn that guitar up for the solo, turn the vocals up for the lead. You can't just keep pushing everything up because eventually you get to the top and it's just a wall of noise. And it's like with this series, this Hobbit movies, the one I've seen thus far, they just kept pushing everything up, and they went, oh, we have to have more action in it, so just push that up. So now the last 30 minutes of it is just action, over the top.
Yeah.
And you just keep pushing everything up, and we have to set up the epicness. Well, it's also a prequel, so we have to push more prequel setup. Well, because we put that in there, we've got to put another action sequence right before that. And you just keep cranking it up and bigger, and it's just a wall of visual noise.
And I have to bring this up, Sean, because there's a part of this where I feel like, okay, there can be a little forgiveness for some of what they did. And then there's a second component where it's like, oh, now that forgiveness is gone. So the first component is this. Peter Jackson was not originally going to direct these movies. That was going to be Guillermo del Toro, I believe. And so he went actually pretty far. And as I'm watching these special features on the extended edition, Guillermo got pretty far in the pre-production phase. He had a lot of stuff done, and then he dropped out. And Peter Jackson looked at all this pre-production stuff and says, I can't make a Guillermo movie. I have to make my own movie. And so he kind of had to push the reset button on all the pre-production. So that's kind of forgivable to me because that's outside of his control. Then Peter Jackson got an ulcer or something and ended up in the hospital for like a month, or was put out of commission for a month. So then he missed an entire month of pre-production and planning. So out of his control, kind of forgivable to me. So now I'm kind of seeing why they lost focus, they lost their plan, they didn't have a steady leader for a while. But then after they really got into filming and things like that, Peter Jackson decided to convince the studio, I could extend this to 3. That to me is where all the stuff that was forgivable now is suddenly unforgivable. Because now you have a guy that doesn't have a plan because of whatever reasons, and now suddenly they're scrambling because they have to add so much more to make this 3 movies. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is... No wonder this movie didn't reach the true epicness that the others were. It had no real vision or plan or anything. And you can feel that as you're watching it, that it just did not have a structure or a plan.
Right, and I think having done a lot of writing and putting things together and video editing on YouTube, if you don't have experience doing that, you don't realize it's a lot easier to make something longer that's just kind of bloated than it is to make something concise. Like I just need to turn a camera on, I can just talk because that's what I do. So if you're a Tolkien fan and love Tolkien and you've read all the material and you just write a script and put everything together, you put all your ideas in there, everything you're excited about, and you put it all in there in your first draft. And that's pretty easy to just kind of take the books and everything, throw it all in there. What's hard is to whittle it down and cut things that you love. Like, man, I love this character, but he doesn't really need to be there. And, well, this is the way it is. It's kind of a prequel, or it's a prequel, so we need to tie it to this other thing. Well, there's a way to do that you do it really concisely. Like, you have one line of dialogue that's so good. But writing a great line of dialogue or just a great short scene takes a long time. Just putting a bunch of stuff in there that references other things is easy to do, but it's not as good. It's not as strong. And that's especially with what you're describing of, hitting that reset when there's a director switch, especially when you're like Guillermo and Peter Jackson are similar in they're both weird directors, but they're also, because they're so weird, they're so specific. And you just have to imagine that you just can't pick up what he did and run with it. You can't do that. And then, like you said, a month of work for guys directing movies. I mean, those aren't 8-hour days. Those are 12, 13, 14, 15-hour days. And giving direction to people working 12, 15, 13-hour, long days too, and the amount of man hours without proper direction and whittling down of things. And then you imagine he comes back and he's behind on everything. And a bunch of people have done a bunch of work. Do you tell them, wrong direction, that sucked, and burn your bridges?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm speculating there, but that's where there's so many things about it. You just see it and you go, ooh, man, there was so much potential to make just a great little adventure movie. And so I guess the other element to it that was somewhat frustrating for me, I'm going to go into my bad parenting. So I was watching my kids Monday night when I watched this. And so I didn't have to run showing this movie to my kids, who are too young to watch it. And so the eventual book is a kid's book. This movie is not a kid's movie at all. And so it's had to send him out of the room a couple times because it was so violent and so... that makes sense if you're trying to make an epic that matches the Lord of the Rings and you want to tie it together. But that's not the source material. It's like you just moved away from a children's book that's an adventure and you turned it into this whole other thing that it's not. What the thing that this story is good at is lost because it's trying to be something else. And so they're trying to make it an epic like this other thing, but it's not an epic story. Therefore, it's a bad epic. It's not a children's story anymore. It's no longer an adventure because we're spending so much time on exposition. And so it stops being any one thing and starts being a bad version of about 5 things.
Yes, I agree with that. And it's funny because when you watch Fellowship of the Ring, Bilbo's talking all about how he misses the adventure. So, I mean, even that references the source material better than The Hobbit did because Fellowship of the Ring knew that Bilbo's story was nothing more than a fun adventure where he happened to find the ring, which brings us into this other story. And I just feel like the studio, Peter Jackson, I don't know who it was who was so nervous about making The Hobbit, its tone and its feel match Lord of the Rings, but I think that was its downfall as to why it wasn't as good. And even with that said, like you said, there are some great character moments in this movie. First off, I love Martin Freeman. Like, he is a great actor, and he was great as Bilbo. I loved his facial expressions. I liked how he reacted to things. And the scene, Riddles in the Dark with Gollum, was so close to the source material. Like, I could not help but love that scene when they're in the cave. Did you have anything like that stood out to you that you really enjoyed with it?
I really enjoyed kind of this opening kind of meal at his home where they're just hanging out and getting like camaraderie, male camaraderie. And just kind of, that's what I remember from the cartoon of just like this quirky, fun environment. And then you're just there and it's like this is just kind of fun to be with them. And so that's where even in the beginning I was like, okay, now I'm getting where this could be where you can expand this and gets really long because it's just fun to be with these people. Well, then they leave there, which at the same time I was like, wow, we're here an awful long time. Then they go on their adventure and it loses that because everything has to be so epic. And so then we get, they're breaking up into different groups so that Gandalf can have meetings with people about the Lord of the Rings and stuff. And then, we get to the big climax of it, and these people over here are jumping off exploding bridges.
Gosh, yes.
While...
Sean, I can't wait till you watch the second one and we talk about it, because there are things in this second one that I cannot wait to get your thoughts on. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, to draw a comparison to where this really... It bothers me as filmmaking. So, rewatched Die Hard about a month ago. Rewatch it every December.
As you should.
And actually saw it in the theater. As everyone should. And they showed it at a local movie theater, I believe, every December, so my wife and I go. And so I watched it, now that I'm doing my video review channel, very much from this eye of the script, the screenwriting, the filmmaking. And it's just such a wonderfully crafted movie that the dialogue in the opening scenes is all about him and his nervousness on a plane and flight. And so a guy tells him to take his shoes off and curl his toes. And you're paying attention to it because it's funny and quirky and interesting. And so he takes his shoes off. And then that's extremely important for the whole movie.
Yeah.
The fact that he doesn't have shoes on. And so you're paying attention to his feet from the beginning. And everything about the movie is setting up little things. Everything ties back. And you're paying attention intently to details you wouldn't normally pay attention to that tie back later into the movie, and you remember them because it gives you so much focus on all the things that matter. The small details, they find a way to make it interesting conversationally tie in that pays off later on.
Yeah.
And most people remember it because of this great character, the great action, but it's great beyond that because of these little things that are just so focused, and you don't know what to pay attention to, but you still know everything you need to know.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of The Hobbit. In which case, I'd seen the cartoon dozens of times. It's been 20 years, but many, many, many times. Read the book, read the synopsis, is very familiar with all of it, and I'm still watching it, and I don't know what I need to pay attention to. I can't remember what's important, and there's just so many things happening that I'm just kind of like, all right, I'm going along on this adventure, but I don't know how it matters. If I were to try and give a synopsis of just the first movie, I don't know what I would say.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like I'd be setting up the world and the idea of what they're doing, but I don't know what you would say the beginning, middle, and end of this film is. What is the obstacle that they overcame in this story that leads to the next thing that needs to happen? It's just we spent 3 hours with Bilbo and Gandalf in Middle-earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
For 3 hours. So unfocused. Stuff happening. Some of it exciting. Some good camaraderie. Some good dialogue. Some of it just stuff.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me because as I learned watching the special features on the extended cut, this movie, it was supposed to be 2 movies, and this first one was supposed to end, if you remember it in the book, where they all get in the barrels and they float on the barrels down the river.
Yeah.
That's where this movie was supposed to take us up to and stop, and from there we pick up with the next one. So you can imagine that this movie should have been a great deal tighter, but that's in closing my talk on The Hobbit, that's like my biggest complaint, and this first one is the least bloated of the others. So, like... Yay! You have so much to look forward to, Sean.
Yeah, so I guess final thoughts. There was no individual moment that I was just dreading, hating. It was nothing like that. Each moment, each scene was enjoyable enough, pleasant enough. The overall experience, though, felt like doing homework. Yeah. Because it's just so much to invest into this story that feels like it should be a simple adventure.
Yeah.
And even if they did 2 movies that would be much shorter than this movie, or 3 movies that were half as long as this movie, but really, I mean, it feels like 1 3-hour movie or 2 2-hour movies, and you've got a great pacing, a great adventure, and that have two different types of stories, where the first one deals with these guys' camaraderie coming together and getting in some wacky hijinks, and then the second half dealing with the actual dragon and battles and things. Like, that's two stories that feel like they fit as a thing in and of themselves, as opposed to bloated plot lines, and we're setting up a prequel, and we're setting up it as an epic, and then we're adding in love stories into the second one. We have to have these 5 armies, so we have to know why they're all incredible, big, gigantic. And once you do that, I mean, you're so much lost from what this story is supposed to be.
Yeah.
But to tie it back to that cartoon, it is 76 minutes long.
God.
It told the whole story of The Hobbit in 76 minutes. Now, granted, that's too short. That's a kid's cartoon.
Yeah.
But it's 76 minutes they told the story.
Yeah. I mean,
this movie alone, twice that.
3 times that.
Over twice that.
Yeah, 3 times that or something like that.
Yeah.
See, to me, that's just the sheer tragedy of this, because I love Lord of the Rings. I love the book, The Hobbit. Love that old 1970s cartoon. And I want to love this trilogy like I love all of that, but it's just too bloated and too stretched out. So that's kind of where Sean and I both stand with The Hobbit. What are your thoughts on The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey? Make sure to let us know in the comments. While you're there, click that subscribe button and become a Durbanian, and go over to Sean Chandler's channel. He loves to talk movies. He loves talking movies with you, so subscribe to his channel as well. Sean, tell us a little bit more about your channel one more time.
Yeah, so on my channel, Monday through Friday, I do movie news, little short 5-minute videos talking about whatever the biggest story of the day is. I see 2-3 movies per week in the theater, try to put those reviews up. And then on Sundays, I do a live show where I try and interact with the chat board. Normally try to bring one of my YouTube buddies on, so Durban's been there on a couple times. But really, like he said, I don't want to just talk about movies. I want to talk about movies with you. I got into doing YouTube because I was tired of watching other people's videos, reading other people's articles, and interacting on their comment section. I wanted to put my ideas out there and kind of like talk with you and start the conversation. And so I love talking with people. That's how I got connected with Durban. That's why I'm doing this video right now. And whoever you are, I would love to talk to you.
Awesome. Well, next week, join us for, what is the second one called? I can't remember now.
Desolation of Smaug.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Sean. How did I forget that? The Desolation of Smaug. So join us next week as we get into that movie and take it apart and dig into it and all that fun stuff. So we're going to review that in our continued retro review series. I'm Durban.
I'm Sean.
Thank you so much for checking out Durbania.